Giving feedback is an important skill for all behavior analysts to develop. Giving feedback is the competency of providing informal and formal praise and corrective feedback to improve performance. This is an important skill for behavior analysts in nearly all of the subspecialties. It is particularly important in performance-based organizational behavior management, training in behavior analysis and education, and in providing supervision for others providing behavior analytic services. For this training, we're going to emphasize giving feedback in the context of supervision. Most of the research on performance feedback and behavior analysis comes from the subspecialty of organizational behavior management, and it can certainly be applied to a lot of different organizational, educational settings, as well as to supervision. Performance feedback is divided into two main categories: objective feedback and evaluative feedback. In objective feedback, we're getting measurement data. So this provides data on specific performance, specific behaviors. In evaluative feedback, we're giving feedback that provides descriptions of performance. So it qualifies the performance levels. Objective feedback gives us raw data on performance. It's a performance monitoring and measurement tool. So frequently this feedback comes directly from observations or counting of permanent products. For example, you completed 5 steps correctly in 3 minutes, or you put all of the materials in the correct order. That's an objective observation that I can give feedback on. So often objective feedback is insufficient on its own to influence performance level significantly. So it's not really going to motivate people to do better or to do more of a desired behavior just having this straight objective feedback. But when it's combined with evaluative feedback or used as a motivating operation or as an SD to evoke higher levels of desired behaviors, then it can be highly effective as it informs the individual that their performance is being observed and measured, which this information, that can be motivating for many people. When they know they're being observed and measured, often that motivates higher levels of desired behavior. Evaluative feedback provides information on how well someone is doing. It can help them see how they are measuring up to expectations or performance criteria, and it can motivate them to do more of some behaviors or less of some behaviors. So evaluative feedback serves multiple functions. It can be a reinforcer for previously determined desired performance behaviors. It can also be a punisher for previously determined undesired performance behaviors. It can be an antecedent for rule-governed future performance behaviors, and it can also be a tool to establish goal criteria for performance levels. Giving good positive feedback in the context of behavior analysis as a supervisor is a good pro-social skill. To give good positive feedback as a supervisor, the feedback you provide should be true, specific, appropriate, and behavior or performance based. In industrial organizational psychology, which is a close cousin to organizational behavior management, there is a general recommendation for workplaces to employ a ratio of 5-to-1 positive comments for every corrective feedback you give. In educational settings, IO psychologists recommend a 4-to-1 ratio of positive to corrective feedback. This ratio isn't always effective at redirecting undesired behaviors because some individuals will focus on the positive out of sheer volume and dismiss the corrective feedback. When receiving positive feedback seems to be an antecedent for ignoring corrective feedback may need to be given independent of positive feedback, but it can still be done respectfully. Giving and receiving corrective feedback can be difficult. Corrective feedback is otherwise known as criticism. Aristotle said, "To avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing." Right? It's not very helpful for us to avoid criticism. We need that corrective feedback if we want to improve and grow and get better. The ability to give and receive criticism well is an important communication skill. Professionally, we often refer to this as a soft skill or a pro-social skill. It must be learned and practiced. We can't assume it will be natural. So it's really valuable to spend some time learning and practicing how to give and receive corrective feedback. There are some things to consider when you're giving corrective or constructive feedback, and I'm using those terms interchangeably here. Right, so corrective feedback is giving specific input offered to improve or further develop skills, further develop performance and behavior. So typically this includes the identification of an undesired behavior or the identification of an absence of a desired behavior or the acknowledgement of a low rate of a desired behavior. And then it also includes and provides the desired replacement behavior or specifies the desired rates of behavior. So it really gives some specifics here. So you want to focus on the behavior, the action, the performance. Don't focus on the person, but really hone in on the behavior that you're talking about. So both in the behaviors of what's done, what you're giving feedback on, what they've already done, and what you're hoping for them to be able to do, the goals for the future. Be specific about the behaviors you're giving feedback on. Don't generalize, don't be vague, really hone in on that specific behavior, those specific expectations. Then provide feedback that is actionable, so things that are within their control, behaviors that they can do, that they can control, and that they have power over. Don't provide input about things that are out of their control, that they can't really manipulate those variables. Really be specific in what they can do. Then offer recommendations or suggestions for improvement that are specific and realistic, that are achievable. So sometimes this means breaking things down into smaller goals, not having huge jump goal expectations, but realizing that people are going to progress at a pretty steady rate usually, and having reasonable expectations when you offer those specific suggestions for improvement. The feedback sandwich is a strategy that's often implemented in both organizational behavior management and IO psychology. It's based on the thought that it is frequently easier to hear and receive criticism when it is presented within the context of positive feedback. So a feedback sandwich is you start with a compliment or a positive feedback, then you bring in your constructive feedback or your corrective feedback, and you end with a compliment or positive feedback. So that's the sandwich. Think of the bread as the positive, something that you've noted and been specific about that somebody did well. Think of the meat of the sandwich or the cheese of the sandwich as being that which is corrective, constructive. That's a little difficult to hear. And then finishing again with something positive and specific, that compliment at the back end. So it's pretty simple. Some people feel really sensitive about this. They feel like it's overused in a lot of practices. But if you are new at giving feedback and you find it uncomfortable to give corrective feedback, this can be a good practice to begin with. It's very simple. It's just the 3 strategies. You just want to be specific in all 3. You don't want to have kind of general positive feedback, specific constructive feedback, and then general positive feedback on the other end. You want to be specific at all 3 layers of this feedback sandwich. Feedback usually is presented either in a verbal format or in a written format. And verbal feedback is probably what we give out the most. And when we're talking about that 5 or 4 to 1 ratio, right, most of that is going to be the verbal feedback. So we're really going to make sure that we are regularly giving people verbal feedback about their performance. And when you're giving verbal feedback, there's a couple things to keep in mind. First of all, if it's positive verbal feedback, it can be public or private. It's great to give people positive feedback in front of their peers, in front of other people. That's great affirmation and reinforcement. But if you're giving corrective feedback, that should be in private as much as possible. You don't want to do that in front of other people, other coworkers, clients that they're working with. So you really want to balance that, pay attention to the setting and the surroundings, the environment when you're giving verbal feedback, and particularly if it's corrective feedback. Written feedback is a little bit different. So we are obligated as behavior analysts to document when we give corrective written feedback. So you want to be keeping that in mind, especially if you're working through an ethical situation with somebody. If there's really a serious issue, you want to document all of that feedback that you're giving them. Do you want to have in your documentation good documentation of the feedback that you've given? You want to have consistent feedback throughout your relationship with somebody that you're supervising. So that written feedback should include both positive and corrective. There should be some of it that's just standalone, the specific feedback that you're giving somebody, but also you're going to include written feedback within documentation reports. If you're doing an analysis of somebody's skills or behaviors, you might include some feedback in that. You might include it in other reports. If there's violations and you're considering how to process that, you're doing a risk reward analysis, you're evaluating different things, then you're going to include that documentation within that report as well. So you do want to have verbal and written feedback that's a pretty regular and consistent part of your supervisory experience with somebody. Giving corrective feedback is one of the times where we actively see the benefits of following the ethical guidelines for not developing multiple relationships with the individuals we supervise. If we have crossed into a friendship with someone, it can be even more challenging to provide effective corrective feedback, which makes us less effective supervisors. Receiving corrective feedback can be difficult. It can add to feelings of insecurity or imposter syndrome, especially when you're trying and working really hard. One strategy that you can do that can really help is to borrow from acceptance and commitment therapy, the reframing it strategy. To look at the corrective feedback not as a personal attack or criticism, but to reframe it as a tool for growth and improvement, as information and data you need to get better and to develop better skills. Use it as an antecedent or a motivating operation to grow and improve in your skills and performance. Corrective feedback can be effectively used to help you develop new performance goals. So use it to help you decide what it looks like to be a little better, to do it a little better, to have more skills, to engage in those desired behaviors more frequently. And that can really help reframe the experience of receiving corrective feedback. If giving and receiving feedback, particularly within the supervision model as a supervisor, is an area that you would like to develop competencies in, then review the role play scenarios that I provided and make some notes, draft some sample responses using the feedback sandwich model that I've given you. Send those notes to me, and then we will practice and role play them in an upcoming supervision meeting. So we'll have some practice with delivering those feedback sandwiches so that you can practice and develop some new competencies. So that's a good way to help develop these skills before you have to put them into practice with people you're actually supervising.